bienvenidos a todos. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros hoy. Es un gusto tenerlos. Este es el tercer en nuestra serie de defensores de la comunidad latina en Carolina del Norte sobre la respuesta ante desastres. Próximo, por favor, Philip. Entonces, es un gusto tener a todos aquí. Próximo, por favor, Philip. Entonces, este es nuestra tercera sesión y esta sesión se trata de defender a los derechos de tu comunidad durante un desastre. Como ya han notado, esta reunión tiene interpretación simultánea y queremos subrayar este valor de justicia del lenguaje. Queremos que todos puedan participar, incluyendo a los que solamente hablan inglés, los que solamente hablan español y los que son bilingües. Es muy importante para nosotros demostrar que es posible tener participación completa de todas personas. Y las instrucciones para entrar en los canales de interpretación también están en el chat. Entonces, yo me llamo Sarah Feldman, trabajo con Rural Forward North Carolina y voy a revisar la agenda con ustedes. Nuestro objetivo en esta red es construir una red estatal para apoyarnos mutuamente y llenar la brecha. Y aquí está nuestra agenda. Estamos empezando y vamos a estar trabajando en grupos durante la reunión. Algo diferente esta vez es que en cada grupo de trabajo va a haber un abogado o asistente legal para empezar a construir relaciones con esta gente y también para poder hacerles preguntas. Tenemos algunos panelistas que van a ofrecernos información, recursos y una perspectiva desde el punto de vista del derecho. Los grupos de trabajo también van a ofrecer a todos la oportunidad de ofrecer ayuda mutua y empezar o continuar estableciendo relaciones uno con el otro. Próximo, por favor, Philip. Entonces voy a pasarlo a Larisa Garzón para ofrecerles un poquito de contexto de esta serie de reuniones.
Buenas tardes a todos. Nuevamente, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros el día de hoy. Defensores de la Comunidad Latina en Carolina del Norte es un grupo que comenzó cuando 4 organizaciones, Amexcan, Comunidades Católicas, la Oficina del Gobernador y Rural Forward, se unieron para crear un plan acerca de cómo incrementar y mejorar los servicios que reciben las comunidades latinas en el contexto de la pandemia.
¿Puede hablar un poquito más despacio para los intérpretes? Disculpe.
Ajá. No, perdón, una disculpa a los intérpretes. Siempre hablo muy rápido. Bueno, entonces, como decía, Amexcan, Comunidades Católicas, la Oficina del Gobernador y Rural Forward se unieron para crear un plan acerca de cómo incrementar y cómo mejorar los servicios que reciben las comunidades latinas en el contexto de la pandemia y de los desastres naturales, específicamente los huracanes. Estas organizaciones se reunieron y decidieron invitar a un grupo diverso de otras organizaciones que incluyen el Centro Unido Latinoamericano, East Coast Migrant Head Start, NC Field, North Carolina Inclusive Disaster Recovery Network, NCBOAT, Manos Unidas, Sea Change, Telamón y el Ministerio Episcopal para los Trabajadores del Campo. Entonces, todas estas organizaciones forman la mesa directiva que ahora se reúne regularmente. El objetivo es crear una red estatal con representantes de diversos grupos que trabajan con diferentes partes de la población y que en un futuro se localicen en los 100 condados. El grupo incluye personas latinas, pero también aliados que están trabajando para el favor de la comunidad.
Muchísimas gracias, Larissa, y gracias por estar con nosotros. Entonces, como pueden ver aquí, este es nuestro objetivo, construir una red estatal que cubre todo el estado de organizaciones sirviendo a comunidades latinas. Y individuos también que son líderes en sus comunidades. Próximo, por favor, Philip. Entonces voy a pasarlo ahora a Maritza Mata para ofrecernos un pequeño resumen de nuestras primeras sesiones.
Gracias, Sara. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Maritza Mata, con la Asociación de Mexicanos de Carolina del Norte. Con mucho gusto les puedo compartir un poco sobre cómo fueron las primeras dos reuniones que tuvimos. La primera reunión fue el 27 de agosto. El tema fue sobre cómo responden los líderes y organizaciones de la comunidad latina a los desastres en el 2020, así que no solamente estuvieron organizaciones latinas, sino que varias agencias y organizaciones en la comunidad que trabajan con la comunidad latina. Así que fue una conversación muy rica sobre cómo respondemos a la comunidad latina. Lo que salió de esta reunión fueron 4 temas. El primer tema sobre la comunicación necesaria entre la comunidad, así que la comunicación eficaz requiere no solo materiales bilingües, sino también competencia cultural, así que no solamente no es suficiente compartir información en español para la comunidad, sino que la competencia cultural con respecto al medio de comunicación, el contenido y el mensajero.
Marisa, ¿puede hablar un poquito más despacio? Disculpe.
Sí, claro. Gracias. Así que tomando todos estos temas en consideración para la comunidad, el segundo tema fue el tema de recursos, así que las comunidades latinas necesitan acceso a servicios de salud, acceso a servicios estatales y acceso a servicios de desastre. Realmente en este tema se discutió sobre la oportunidad y la habilidad de obtener estos recursos para las comunidades latinas. Y eso también pues se menciona con la comunicación, que no solamente la comunicación, los recursos, todo juega una parte muy integral para poder apoyar a la comunidad latina. El tercer tema que se habló fue la equidad. Las comunidades latinas están desproporcionadamente afectadas por desastres por la falta de condiciones. El segundo tema, alianza. Responder efectivamente a desastres significa formar alianzas, y creo que estas reuniones han servido mucho para poder establecer esas alianzas. En los grupos que tenemos, muchas veces 2 veces en cada reunión, esos 5 o 10 minutos que nos dan sirven para poder establecer alianzas. Muchas veces pensamos que conocemos a las organizaciones en Carolina del Norte, pero a veces no es así. Puede haber una organización en el otro lado del estado que hace trabajo similar a nosotros, pero no estamos informados. Así que eso fue la primera reunión. La segunda reunión fue el 13 de septiembre. Se discutió sobre cómo responden las agencias públicas a los desastres en el 2020. Igual como la primera reunión, muy buena conversación sobre cómo están trabajando las organizaciones latinas con las agencias públicas para poder trabajar juntos para apoyar a la comunidad. Esta reunión fueron igual 4 temas: la comunicación, recursos y equidad, pero también partnership. La alianza es lo que más se estableció en esta reunión, la necesidad de la alianza, no solamente entre organizaciones latinas, pero en agencias, en cualquier grupo de personas que ofrecen algún tipo de apoyo para los latinos, que muchas veces estamos haciendo cosas separadas, donde si nos podemos juntar y podemos ofrecer servicios juntos, pues es mucho mejor para la comunidad. Y muchas de las barreras que una organización latina tiene, las agencias públicas pueden apoyar, y las barreras que las agencias públicas tienen, las organizaciones latinas pueden apoyar. Así que mutuamente tener esa alianza. Y parece que es todo, Sara. Más que nada, agradecerles a todos que están aquí con nosotros, y estamos aquí para lo que se necesite.
Muchas gracias, Maritza. Entonces, ahí está un poquito del contexto y voy a revisar nuestras normas. El primero, escucha y demuestra que hoy es un poquito diferente cuando estamos aquí en Zoom, pero hacemos lo mejor que podemos. El segundo, no hay que estar de acuerdo, se atacan a los problemas, no a la gente. El tercer, ocupa espacio, comparte espacio. Entonces, tercer norma significa básicamente que para los que como yo me siento más cómoda hablando en grupos, que a lo mejor puedo callarme un poquito para dar ese espacio a otra gente. Y para la gente que a lo mejor es un poquito más tímida, no se siente tan cómoda hablando en grupos, les invitamos a participar y ocupar ese espacio. El cuarto, confidencialidad. Para nosotros eso básicamente significa que cada uno puede compartir su propia historia, pero no vamos a compartir las historias de los demás. Sobre todo no usando sus nombres o detalles que identificaría a esa persona. Y también, bueno, normalmente en las reuniones que Roll Forward hace, cuando mandamos el resumen de la reunión, incluimos la información de contacto de cada participante. Si usted no quiere que su información sea compartida, nada más avísenos y podemos asegurar que no compartimos su información. La última, utilice las herramientas que tenemos. Y en Zoom eso significa que vamos a estar en grupos de trabajo y también queremos invitarles a usar el chat para hacer preguntas, para conectar con otra gente y para apoyarnos a tener un récord pleno de la reunión. También cuando estamos en grupos de trabajo, vamos a pedir que alguien en cada grupo tome notas para luego compartir en el chat con el grupo completo. Muchísimas gracias. Entonces, vamos a ir en grupos pequeños para conocernos, y en cada grupo no se olviden que hay un abogado o asistente legal con quien se puede conectar y hacer preguntas. muchísimas gracias a todos por poner los temas en el chat que surgieron de los grupos de trabajo.
All right. Y'all can keep doing that in there. I'm going to name a couple of things that I'm seeing. Language barriers or language justice continues to be something that is a theme across all of these workshops. Looking for housing for people in need, working around documentation issues, trying to figure out what services are available to people based on their documentation status. And I also saw Caroline Farmer, who's one of the reasons that these workshops are happening, already setting up the next topics for the next workshop. So I appreciate that. We're going to turn it over and have a little bit of conversation with some of the experts, some of the attorneys and paralegals that you met in the breakout rooms. You're going to be back in the same breakout rooms in a couple of minutes, so you'll get to continue those conversations and process through some of those ideas that you were thinking about, that you were talking about, that you've heard from the panel of experts. We've got a couple of different folks here today from Legal Aid North Carolina. They'll tell you about who they are and what they do. And we have folks from both the Disaster Services Unit and the Farm Workers Unit. We also have their colleagues from the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center. And I want to pause here for a second and make sure that if you're listening to the English channel, you should be hearing my voice. Can I get a thumbs up from everybody that they can hear me in the language of their choosing? Awesome. All right. My name, by the way, is Andy Schoenig. I work with Sarah at Rural Ford, North Carolina, and I'm the English facilitator, English language facilitator for today. Let's open this conversation up by asking Legal Aid and North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center to tell us a little bit about their roles in disaster response and recovery. I'm going to start by turning to Marion. Marion, tell us what is Legal Aid's role in disaster response and recovery?
Okay, fantastic. And I don't know if now's a good time for the slides or not, but we prepared a few little slides. Legal Aid, thank you, translated. Legal Aid, we are a nonprofit law firm. We do provide free civil legal services to low-income people, to people who qualify. This is an effort to remove the barriers to, the legal barriers to economic opportunity. Anything, of course, that we share today is just for education and informational purposes. A big part of what we do at Legal Aid is help people become aware that they have a legal issue. Oftentimes people just know that for whatever reason they can't get something done. I work with the Disaster Relief Project. We are working with people who experienced catastrophic loss during Hurricane Florence 2 years ago. And many of them are still in their severely damaged homes. I have clients who say they have fallen through the floor up to their, up to their knees, or they step through their floor. And in other words, they haven't been able to get repairs done. That's just an example of the type of client that the Disaster Relief Project works with. And these clients are people who did not realize they had a legal issue. They were denied insurance, or they were denied assistance from FEMA. And now they're trying to apply for assistance through other programs. And they find that they do not know who owns their property. They do not know whose name is on the deed. They do not have a birth certificate. And so we are able to assist them. And thank you for advancing the slide. Here are some of the in a disaster, it's important for people to know what their rights are. They have a right to emergency alerts and evacuation information. They have a right to short-term aid and to shelter. And then after the disaster, you have rights to pursue an appeal if you're denied some kind of assistance through an agency, whether it's your insurance company or federal assistance. And in those cases, you may need a legal advocate. And that's legal aid. We can, and Andy, I can continue with all of our slides if you think this is the appropriate time.
Let me actually turn to your colleague, Catherine Asaro, who's with the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center. Catherine, y'all have a slightly different role to play, but you work hand in hand with legal aid. Tell us about that.
Yes. And I actually just sent you a link to our website. I didn't know if that would be a good thing to pull up, but if not, not a problem at all. Marion, that was great. And so the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center, we are a program of the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission. And the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission is a commission of the North Carolina Supreme Court. So our executive director reports to the Chief Justice, Justice Beasley of the North Carolina Supreme Court. And the Pro Bono Resource Center, we're actually celebrating our 5th birthday early next year. And we came into being when, at that point, Chief Justice Martin saw a real need to try and get North Carolina attorneys to volunteer more time to help with unmet legal needs. And I was hired in 2018 after Hurricane Florence in a special round of funding to help with hurricane unmet legal needs. And that is my first foray into disaster legal services. And since then, I have worked in conjunction with Legal Aid, the North Carolina Bar Foundation, and other organizations across the state. We do not provide legal services, direct legal services ourselves. We coordinate pro bono projects to complement.
Catherine, you are a very fast talker because there's so much you're trying to get in. Slow down. Be kind to our interpreters.
Sorry, I am a fast talker. That's it. Sorry. I apologize to everyone. But so we do not provide direct legal services. We design pro bono projects to complement, and generally to complement our legal service providers, mostly Legal Aid. And our goal is to help people who have unmet legal needs, who do not necessarily qualify for legal aid but cannot afford legal help. And that is a huge, huge swath of people, as Miriam was saying, in North Carolina, with all the same issues that they are seeing. We try and organize volunteers to help with that. And we actually just launched a project with Legal Aid of North Carolina to help North Carolinians fill out rebuild applications, which is directly Hurricane Florence related. That felt slow to me, but was probably still pretty fast, and I apologize.
It's something we're all getting used to. Let me ask, there's a question in the chat here that Beatrice brought up, and I'm going to turn to Ben to answer this question here, because one of the questions that has come up over the last 2 workshops and keeps coming up is, what services are available if you are not documented? So I'll ask you to answer that, but keep that in mind as you're answering this question. Ben, you've seen disaster legal services from a couple of different perspectives at the North Carolina Justice Center and now at Legal Aid working with the Farm Worker Unit. You came on just after Florence happened. So tell me, what kind of legal issues come up for for Latino communities immediately and also ongoing?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I'm unmuted. So to Beatrice's question, she's right. You know, in the aftermath of a disaster, the benefits or the help that people with immigration status can get might differ from people without any immigration status. And then there's also shades in between, right? There's temporary guest worker visas who come here for a limited season to work, and they can get some, you know, benefits that others might not. I would encourage the folks on this call to think of, you know, a lot of times we think of people and, you know, whether that person has status or that person doesn't have status. But when you're dealing with a disaster like a hurricane, a lot of times you're not helping individuals so much as you're helping families, right? And so there are some creative things that you can do for people without status to help them and to alleviate some of the pain or some of the suffering that they might be experiencing in the wake of a hurricane. So one example of this would be, you know, a family of 4 where maybe the parents are lack documentation or lack status, but the kids were born here, and so they're citizens, right? And so if they have a social security number and you live in the same household, you could actually do a FEMA application through the child. And the beneficiary would be the child rather than the parents, and that can help qualify you, you know, for housing assistance, etc. But again, I mean, probably the best answer would be, you know, try to consult with the legal professional as quick as you can, who can kind of take into account immigration status, and legal aid is great at that, right? If you have status or you don't have status, or you fall somewhere in between, call us and ask us questions, and we can probably advise you the best of what options you have.
When you were working after Florence, tell me a little more about what specific issues came up with Latino families that you were working with. Larissa put one in the chat here that Latinos who are living in trailer homes can't put the trailer in their name because they don't have a driver's license, and a trailer is not considered a home, it's considered a vehicle.
Yeah, so property ownership issues were, you know, probably the biggest issue that I confronted. And, you know, a lot of times, right, if they don't have a driver's license, they can't register, you know, their vehicle. Or sometimes they don't take, because again, it's, you know, there might be cultural differences that they don't realize. But, you know, in the United States, they have a very, I would call it antiquated, really, system of kind of property registration. To where if you buy a mobile home, right, you might just show up, pay somebody $8,000 for the mobile home, they give you the key, and for all intents and purposes, you know, the mobile home is yours. You bought it, you paid $8,000. Maybe you even got a loan to buy the mobile home, but then you didn't get a title for the mobile home, right? And even if you did get a title, maybe you didn't register it. And then so when you're trying to go to FEMA and say, hey, I need money to fix my home, they'll say, okay, well, show us that you own the home. And you're left without any paper. On paper, you don't own the home. And so it's very difficult to do that. You know, so the best way to combat that is to be proactive, right? So rather than going into these communities and neighborhoods and homes after a disaster, we should be going in there 6 months before, right? So there's hurricane season, and then there's preparation season. And if we're robust and diligent in preparation season, our hurricane season can be a bit better.
So I'm hearing, on the one hand, there's some policy changes that need to be made legislatively that would help Latino communities prepare better. On the other, at the same time, there's some preparation work that attorneys want to be building partnerships to be able to do. Let me ask Marian again, tell us a little bit more about what are some of the specific legal issues that Latino communities experience during hurricanes, and also maybe during COVID-19.
I don't want to get too much. I don't want to get too much out of my depth, and I know there's some other legal aid folks here that may do a better job of this than me. But one of certainly language, and I think Ben just really described the some of the issues with ownership and demonstrating ownership. Going back to the CDC moratorium on evictions, there's a specific form that you have to have that's very easy to find and fill out once you know about it, but you've got to have that information that because of COVID, evictions have halted. You've got to have that specific form, and you've got to, you know, assert that you've tried to pay your rent, and then you give this form to your landlord and to the courts. If you don't have that, it's simple information, but if you don't have it, you do not have access to that eviction moratorium, or the you know, you don't have a right to, because from what I understand, evictions are happening right now because people do not have that form. So these are just some of the barriers I think that are endemic to a lot of people, but I think specifically to immigrants and people who do not perhaps speak English or fluent English.
So again, language barrier being a key one. I want to see, I've got two more questions before we go back to breakout groups here. I wanted to check in, Caitlin, you work with farm workers in particular. Is there anything that you wanted to share about issues specific to the clients that you serve? And I apologize.
Yeah, no, and Ben is also in the farm worker unit. I mean, we serve a lot of clients that are migrant farm workers, some of whom are here on a temporary agricultural visa, and that visa is tethered to one employer. That can put, migrant farm workers already have so much of their lives controlled by their employer that, you know, a professional or even someone working at a construction company or at a meat packing plant does not. Your ability to get mail, to go to the store, to get food, your paycheck, your housing, your ability to get medical care. And if your immigration status is also controlled by that employer after, during, in preparation for a disaster, that puts you in a very vulnerable position. So we've helped workers in the past that were here on that temporary agricultural visa program whose employers had unlawfully retained their passports or identification documents. We've also helped where they were in housing and that housing was not habitable. We've helped other farm workers where they were eligible for disaster unemployment benefits, but we went to help them apply in conjunction with the local unemployment office, who did a wonderful job of helping us sort of meet some literacy and language needs. But it turns out they had sort of been operating in an informal economy, and their employer had not been reporting their wages to the government. So it delayed their disaster benefits and getting their checks because there had to be a whole wage audit. So we've definitely seen for farm workers and other low-wage workers that a disaster can sort of reveal a really awful situation, or it could create the conditions for a situation where someone's rights are going to be violated. And that's where we've represented victims of human trafficking.
Catherine, with the Pro Bono Resource Center, y'all have a program that's specific to COVID-19 and to hurricanes. Can you just let people know what's available if you are a small business owner or if you're a nonprofit?
Absolutely. So we partnered with some large law firms. I'll speak to the COVID project first. And if you have a small business or a nonprofit, and by small, we define it as less than 25 employees, that's the only criteria, you can apply on our website, and there is attorneys, or there are attorneys that will give 45 minutes of free legal consultation for any COVID related question. And those questions, we started this in May, so they've run the gamut from government benefits to when things were reopening, issues that people had around liability and things like that. Now, unfortunately, we are moving to a lot of questions about bankruptcy and not being able to pay rents and things like that. But I will share that in the chat. That's open to anyone in North Carolina, like I said. And then in addition to that, we have a very robust Hurricane Florence helping program that is to help anyone who is not eligible for legal aid. We will try and pair you with a pro bono attorney to get you some of the help that you may need. Legal aid is always the line of first defense, and that's where you should call. But like we said, there's a large swath of people that can't get that help, and we don't have quite as many restrictions that way.
So I know that on this call, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations. There are some small business owners that if there are some of those issues coming up for you, that the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center might be a resource for you.
Absolutely, we would love that. We've helped, it's been, I think we're close to 170 small businesses and nonprofits so far, and we have capacity to help as many as needed. So please, please do. I will drop that in the chat right now.
Seeing some comments in the chat here that I want to encourage people to keep using the tools that we have, this group chat, a great conversation here about some of the issues, what's available for folks based on their documentation status, literacy issues and education levels. I'll keep that going. I got to get to probably what I think is the most important question is is this, and I want to turn to Joanna Bravo on this one, which is about partnerships. That's the title of this workshop. How can partnerships with public interest law help support community needs? And talk a little bit about your role, because if I understand correctly, this is your role, is building those partnerships.
Sí, claro que sí. Muchas gracias. Exacto, nuestro trabajo, como ya mencionó Ben y Caitlin y Marian, ayuda legal da representación legal gratuita y bueno, nuestra oficina a trabajadores agrícolas, pero sabemos, como Caitlin mencionó, para los trabajadores de campo hay varias barreras y desafíos para poder tener acceso a estos recursos y estas organizaciones. Entonces, parte de nuestro trabajo también es, bueno, muchas partes, pero una parte es ir a los campamentos a educar a los trabajadores sobre sus derechos y los recursos que existen en la comunidad. Nosotros también participamos de diferentes coaliciones que trabajan con los trabajadores de campo en diferentes sectores de salud, educación, aparte legal, nosotros, el Ministerio Episcopal. Entonces creo que ser parte de esas coaliciones y esos networks ayuda a poder distribuir más de los materiales que tratamos de crear y la información que tratamos de compartir con los trabajadores de campo, pero aparte también crear comunidad y apoyo para individualmente, pero a la vez también a la comunidad. Entonces, creo que esta reunión ayuda para crear esas conexiones y para que más otros advocates sepan de los recursos y los servicios que nosotros servimos para poder seguir compartiendo y creando crear los materiales culturalmente apropiados. Podemos crearlos nosotros o también compartir otros materiales que otras organizaciones y otros sectores elaboran. Entonces, en sí creo que es la parte de aprender, empoderar a la comunidad y seguir educándolos y compartir materiales y como hizo también Ben, no en el momento, pero antes, la prevención y educación y la colaboración entre todos.
I heard awareness is a big piece of the work that you do. Are there any, what does somebody who's never worked with an attorney before need to know about working with an attorney?
Claro que sí. Yo diría que uno, por ejemplo, bueno, tenemos que se tiene que crear esa, bueno, hay varias barreras. Uno, que si una persona llama a nuestra oficina no significa que va a haber un caso, es solamente para preguntar, puede ser preguntas, apoyo, educación, el cliente o los service providers, disculpe mi Spanglish, los proveedores de servicio, pueden también llamarnos para hacer preguntas. Viene de dos lados. Nosotros necesitamos que la comunidad sepa que nos prestamos servicios para que podamos apoyarlos, pero los clientes o los proveedores de servicio tienen también, nos pueden hacer preguntas. No, ellos, como te digo, no es nosotros tenemos que tomar las riendas 100%, queremos que haya mucha comunicación, colaboración y confianza, y queremos que sepan que también apoyamos para hacer diferentes servicios. No solamente es un caso legal, podría ser para hacer una queja confidencial con el Departamento de Trabajo o hacer una queja confidencial sobre el acceso a exposición a los pesticidas. Hay diferentes remedios y opciones y cada persona va a tener sus propias opciones o servicios. Entonces queremos solamente mencionar que estamos aquí para apoyarlos y servirlos y empoderar a los clientes y trabajar juntos, al igual que con los proveedores de servicios.
Thanks for letting me catch up with the interpretation here. The resources that you shared there, the myths that, or not myths that you were dispelling, but helping people understand just what it's like to work with an attorney. Larissa Garzon putting in the chat, she likes that legal aid gives printed materials to distribute, because small organizations, printing costs money. and a big ask there for other agencies to do the same. We are going to head back into our breakout rooms because I want to continue this question with that exact question here. This again is the key. What kinds of partnerships, what kinds of partnerships can you build with attorneys, with legal aid to help advocate for your community? What questions do you still have about that? You're going to be in your same groups, and you will still have someone from the Pro Bono Resource Center or from the North Carolina Bar Foundation or from legal aid to help answer those questions. Sound good? It's 4:33, so we will be in our breakout rooms, it looks like, for just about 20 minutes. We'll come back, we'll wrap up, and a reminder again, if there are questions, if there are resources shared, take notes on that and share them back with the main group. We'll make sure it all goes out in the meeting summary with the slides and with the recording. And we'll see you all in just about 20 minutes. See some of our small group facilitators putting in some of the notes. If there is anything that you didn't get a chance to say, take some time right now in the chat and add some of those in here. The more specific, if there are open questions that you didn't get answered, the more specific the better. We'll make sure that they get to hopefully someone who can answer them. We're getting ready to wrap up in the last 5 minutes, and I know people will often have to sneak away as things finish. So I'm going to ask one more question to our panel, but as that's happening, please don't forget to help us know how we're doing, how did this work, what else we can do as we plan the next of these sessions. There's a link in the chat to an evaluation form. We'll keep putting it in there. Final question to our panelists here as we wrap up. I'm going to open it up and ask, how can communities prepare to avoid issues in the first place? What is the best resource to get prepared? What's the most important thing you need to do to prepare? Who wants to take that from our panel?
I can take it, Andy. So one of the things that legal aid did a good job on, I think, was, after Florence, we started developing a disaster toolkit, and we had a staff member of our office. She was a Jesuit volunteer who went and did a listening tour, spoke with a lot of people, a lot of community members in English and Spanish, and she put together this toolkit that's phenomenally impressive. It's version 1.0 is currently out. We're currently revising it for version 2.0. I think the plan is for it to be a standing publication, that we're constantly revising, and it basically breaks it down. And it's designed for service providers like that are on this call, right? And advocates who work for the farm worker community specifically, but a lot of it can be adapted for the Latino community generally. And it breaks it down into before, during, and after a disaster. And it kind of gives you step-by-step guidance or instructions about what you can do, at each stage of the disaster. So if we're talking about preparedness, we'd want to go look at the before the disaster part of the toolkit. And, there's some step-by-step guidance about, making sure that your house is registered or that you have a title or deed to where you live, if that's possible, and stuff like that, making sure that you have food supply for 72 hours, your ability to access shelters, your right to language access, stuff like that. That can be really helpful. If anyone wants to add to that, feel free.
Quick follow-up, is that toolkit available in Spanish?
Joanna, it will probably be better equipped to answer that than I am. Joanna, do we provide the toolkit in Spanish?
I don't think so. I think we just have it in English. Oh, am I muted?
Nope,
we can hear you.
No, I think we just have it in English right now, but we can definitely, like I said, as we're doing version 0.2, we can translate it or not. But I just shared the link to the access to the toolkit on the chat for everyone.
There's a link in the chat there. Ben, if you can answer this in 30 seconds or less, a question from Victoria. How is the information you're talking about distributed within all of these different kinds of communities?
So a lot of the work that we've done is through a coalition that Legal Aid is a part of called the Farm Worker Advocacy Network, right? So much like this Defender network that y'all have put together, we have a farm worker network that's very similar, and we've distributed through them.
Farm Worker Advocacy Network, I'm hearing the power of networks to get information out and about and around. We have just about a minute and a half left. Sarah, take us home.
Entonces, primero quiero agradecer a nuestros panelistas y a todos los participantes.
What she sent me was
estar con nosotros. Ha sido un gusto tener a todos por esta serie de 3 partes. Sabemos que tenemos algunas preguntas que todavía necesitan respuestas. Un grupo estaba preguntando en particular sobre recursos disponibles para servicios legales de inmigración y asilo, por ejemplo. Entonces vamos a seguir con un resumen de esta reunión. También, si ustedes tienen recursos, compártenlos con nosotros y podemos repartirlos al grupo en general. Y espero que esto no sea la última vez que estemos juntos. Tenemos la oportunidad, a lo mejor está todavía en progreso, pero estamos pensando que tendremos la opción de participar en una sesión de escucha con la Oficina de Recuperación de Pandemia del Estado de Carolina del Norte. Y disculpe porque creo que no dije bien el nombre. Andy, do you wanna?
NC Pro, North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office.
Gracias. Entonces, una sesión de escucha con esta oficina y les mantendremos al tanto con toda esa información. También estaremos mandando a todas un resumen de esta sesión, de la última sesión, y eso va a incluir la información de contacto y también los recursos mencionados. Entonces, muchísimas gracias a todos. Pusimos en el chat la encuesta en que nos pueden ofrecer sus opiniones sobre estas sesiones. Y otra vez quiero agradecerles a todos. Muchísimas gracias y que les vaya muy, muy bien.
Gracias.
We will be in touch.
Todos estaremos en contacto con todos.
Gracias.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you.
Bye, adiós. Gracias.
Ustedes.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.